Now, as some of you might already know, I'm in seminary to become an interfaith minister. So it really is my great pleasure to be talking to you today about my personal experience with prayer. I wasn't always interested in spirituality or religion. In fact, it was far from it. I was raised what I would call a fundamentalist atheist. Yeah, my folks were devout, textbook-thumping atheists. And in my house, Darwin was God, and scientists were the clergy. And prayer would have been considered delusional, if not a really dirty word. So for me, growing up, spirituality was kind of considered delusional. And yet, I harbored a terrible sin. Now, y'all know what the word sin really means, right? The accurate definition of the word sin is to miss the mark. It's a mistake. But back then, I took on the more Western contemporary definition, which was I had this terrible shame. It was unforgivable what I was doing. And my sin was that late at night, when the house was quiet, lights were off, nobody could see me, I would pray, "Dear Darwin, help me out here." So, of course, my folks would have had a field day making fun of me for this, so I kept it a secret. And I felt, I believed deep down into the marrow of my bones that prayer was a superstitious drivel. But frankly, I couldn't help myself. I figured, well, couldn't do any harm. And so when I wanted a friend to invite me to a birthday party or something like that, it's like a buckshot approach, right? Let's do everything we can to make sure I'm on that guest list. I don't know who or what I thought I was praying to. In fact, I never really looked deeply into that question. Because if I had, I would have talked myself out of it. And it was a comforting practice. So here I was with this conflict. On the one hand, prayer is delusional. On the other hand, I'm doing it. I minimized it to myself. I said, well, at least, I'm not expecting an answer. Because Lily Tomlin has a great quote. Why is it when we talk to God, we're said to be praying, but when God talks back to us, we're schizophrenic? But at some point back then, I must have made up my mind that I would need to find a more relevant interpretation of what I was doing if I was going to maintain any integrity with myself. And fortunately, as I got older, my prayer practice did mature beyond the getting on the guest list phase. But it wasn't until I discovered silence in prayer. Or in some traditions, as we've said earlier, contemplation. Some traditions, they call it contemplation. And my thoughts would go deeper than I could logically credit to my own intellect, if that makes any sense. And I'd always been taught to rely really heavily on my analytical mind. It never dawned on me that I could find the solution to a problem without grinding those mental wheels. And there's a quote by Albert Einstein that goes, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. And we have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." He also said, "Monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." So for me, It wasn't until I learned for myself to stop, take a few breaths, before I spoke or even before I thought. But more than that I stopped trying to control, that logical process, that analytical process, that I let that go, surrendered that. It wasn't until I stopped that and let the silence, the stillness come in, that I ever even came close to having any insight into what I would call real wisdom. And I never knew where that wisdom was coming from. All I knew was that some of what was bubbling up in me was beyond what my little mind could ever have dreamed of on its own. Now, in high school biology, we're taught that a closed system will become stagnant, and left like that, it will even begin to rot. So my spirituality moved beyond this self-contained, self-reliant, self-centered, really, little hormonal biomass, to an understanding that not only are we irrevocably and integrally interdependent parts of a much greater psychological, emotional, physical whole, but that also on some unfathomable level, there's a mystery about myself, and I believe that there's a mystery about all individuals, about all of this. There's a mystery about myself that my intellect can't even come close to figuring out with reason alone, as tempting as that is. So my pride, my arrogance, my pettiness, my narrow-minded judgments, my small-minded anxieties, they were all getting in the way of a healthy relationship with other people, with the world, with myself. And we all know fundamentalism in any context, forces almost everything to be judged through too narrow a lens. And for me, I was blocking out all the shades of credibility that lay just beyond what I was willing to consider because I was so intellectually married to a certain rationale. So eventually I did take the risk. I opened my mind. I challenged those rigid judgments of words like prayer and God. And I ended up adopting what I would consider a more liberal view, a more relevant perspective and interpretation of what I was actually experiencing. And I love the chant that we did earlier, Om Namah Shivaya. That chant invites me, the greater me, right, the capital M me, the big mystery me, to intervene and strip me of what blinds me to a deeper, more profound compassion and understanding of myself and of others. And Sam Shoemaker, the Episcopal priest who Bill Wilson credits as being one of the co-founders of AA, he once said, "Prayer may not change things for you, but prayer will change you for things." Prayer, chant, meditation, contemplation, these all help me break that seal between the little ego me that thinks it's all that, right, and the greater mystery. And frankly, I'm never disappointed with the experience. So I'll end now with just a brief anecdote about my dad. My father was the patriarch in our little atheist congregation, I'll call our family. And like most little girls, my dad was my God. In 2007, my dad was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. By that time, I was in my 40s, and I still hung on every word of his. I spent a lot of time in the hospital with him, and on more than one occasion, he could be found gripping his bed rails, his body all tense, and he's working that nurse button. He's trying to get somebody to come around and, relieve him of this pain. And invariably, somebody would show up at some point, pop their head in the door and say, "Yeah, Frank, haven't forgotten about you, okay? Just heading down to the pharmacy, getting your meds now, I'll be right back." His whole body would relax. His head would go back to the pillow. His eyes would look up to wherever. And he'd say, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." So now, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to say a little prayer of thanks myself. If you're moved, please feel free to close your eyes or whatever you like to do when you pray, or nothing at all, as I begin. Infinite body of our collective being, I look around and I see that clearly there is a remarkable web of hands and hearts that cradle this community, and that a lot of work is being done here in this congregation. Our younger generations are being nurtured with the seeds of open-mindedness, social awareness, and acceptance. The building we enjoy here every week is being tended to with great diligence. Our social action is alive and well. We're moved each week with the most amazing music. And all of this is supported by a staff who work tirelessly to make sure this all runs smoothly. We enjoy the fruits of the work of so many hands here. We are likewise also blessed then by all those who feel moved to support this work through our weekly collections and the annual pledge drives. May we all continue to enjoy these blessings for many, many years to come. I give thanks now to the great mystery, to this community, and so